My fiancé moved her gym trainer into our house 2 weeks after my military deployment and used my combat pay to fund their romance. I, 28M, always thought I had a good eye for judging people, but I guess 6 years of trust can disappear in a single moment. I met Poppy, 27F, back in 2018 at my friend Mark's backyard barbecue. Mark, 29M, and I went through basic training together, and he was stationed at the same base. Poppy was his coworker's sister who had just moved to the area for a fresh start after a bad breakup. From the beginning, Poppy was different from anyone I had dated before. She understood the demands of military life, having grown up in a military family herself. Her father and 2 brothers served, so she knew what she was getting into with me. After my previous relationship ended badly because my ex couldn't handle the long deployments, finding someone who accepted my career choice meant everything. We moved in together after dating for a year. I had just made staff sergeant, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Poppy got along amazingly with my family, especially my sister Amy, 31F. They became best friends, going shopping together, having weekly brunches, and even taking weekend trips. My parents treated her like the daughter they never had, and my mom was over the moon when Poppy would spend weekends learning family recipes and helping with holiday preparations. 3 years into our relationship, right before my first deployment, I proposed. It was nothing fancy, just a quiet evening at home after a special dinner I cooked. Poppy burst into tears of joy, hugged me tight, and promised she would wait for me forever. We decided to wait until after my 3rd deployment to get married when I would transition to a more stable position with less frequent deployments. My first 2 deployments went smoothly, or so I thought. Poppy wrote me beautiful letters, sent care packages, and kept me updated about her life back home. She took care of our house, managed our finances responsibly, and even started a small side business selling handmade jewelry online. I was so proud of how well she handled everything while I was away. For my 3rd deployment, we decided to be extra practical about our finances. I set up a joint account where my combat pay would go directly. The plan was simple. Poppy would manage the account and save for our wedding while I was away. She seemed excited about the responsibility and sent me regular updates about venue hunting, comparing caterer prices, and looking at flower arrangements. She even made a shared Pinterest board where she would pin ideas for me to look at during my downtime. Every week, Poppy would send me detailed breakdowns of our savings growth and wedding expenses. She would tell me about visiting different venues, meeting with vendors, and researching honeymoon destinations. Sometimes she would complain about how expensive everything was getting, but assured me she was being careful with our money. Looking back, I should have noticed how vague her actual spending details were. The truth hit me like a freight train last week. I had just returned to base after my deployment when my sister Amy called. I could tell something was wrong from her voice. She hesitated before telling me she needed to show me something important. What followed was a series of screenshots from her friend Katie's Instagram stories spanning the last year. There was Poppy, my fiancé, in photo after photo, wrapped in the arms of some guy I'd never seen. They were at high-end resorts in Cancun, partying in Las Vegas nightclubs, sunbathing on Miami beaches, and dining at expensive restaurants in New York. In some photos, Poppy was wearing designer clothes and jewelry I had never seen before, items that definitely weren't from her modest jewelry business income. The worst part? The dates on these posts lined up exactly with the times Poppy told me she was visiting her sick grandmother in Florida. She had used my combat pay, money I earned while dodging bullets and losing friends, to fund romantic getaways with her affair partner. All those venue visits and vendor meetings she told me about? They never happened. The entire wedding planning was a lie to cover her tracks. When I confronted Poppy over video call, she crumbled immediately. But instead of real remorse, all I got were excuses. She talked about feeling lonely, needing companionship, and how hard deployments were for her. When I brought up the money, nearly $30,000 of my combat pay spent on luxury vacations, she got defensive. She accused me of being materialistic and said I owed her for all the time she spent waiting for me. The betrayals kept piling up. My sister revealed that several of our mutual friends knew about Poppy's affair but kept quiet. Poppy had convinced them that telling me during deployment would put me at risk by distracting me in a war zone. Even Mark, my best friend since basic training, admitted he knew but was waiting for the right time to tell me. The people I trusted most had watched me get played for a fool and said nothing. As I write this from my sister's guest room, my phone keeps lighting up with messages from Poppy. She switches between desperate apologies and angry accusations, claiming I drove her to this by choosing the military over her. My parents are devastated. Mom had spent countless hours helping Poppy plan a wedding that was never going to happen, and Dad, a veteran himself, can't even speak about it without getting angry. I've contacted my bank about the unauthorized spending and spoken to a military lawyer about my options. At least we never made it to the altar. That's one small mercy in this mess. But it doesn't make it any easier to accept that 6 years of my life were built on lies. Every deployment, every care package, every love letter, every future plan we made, it was all fake. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't even the money or the cheating. It's knowing that while I was in a war zone, watching my brothers in arms die and counting the days until I could come home to her, Poppy was living her best life with another man. Every time she sent me a photo of a potential wedding venue, she was actually on vacation with him. Every time she talked about saving for our future, she was spending my money on him. I had to take down all our photos because I can't look at them without wondering if she was already cheating in them. Update 1. I want to start by thanking everyone for their supportive comments and messages. Reading through hundreds of responses from people who understood my pain or had been through similar situations helped me feel less alone. Several fellow service members reached out to share their own stories, and their advice has been invaluable. The past 2 weeks have been a roller coaster of revelations, each one worse than the last. After my initial post, Poppy started showing up at my sister's house every day. She would sit in her car for hours, waiting to catch me. When that didn't work, she tried a different approach. She cornered me outside one morning and spun an elaborate story about how everyone had misunderstood the situation. The guy in the photos, his name is Jake, was supposedly just a good friend who helped her deal with the loneliness of deployment. Poppy claimed their trips were innocent outings between friends, and she only spent my combat pay because Jake insisted on treating her to nice places to cheer her up. She even tried to paint him as some kind of selfless hero who was just looking out for a soldier's struggling fiancé. But then my sister Amy revealed something that made my blood run cold. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who has lived next door to us for 20 years and treats me like a grandson, had been calling Amy repeatedly during my deployment. She was worried about a strange man who had moved into our house just 2 weeks after I left. When Amy confronted Poppy about it, she begged my sister not to tell me, claiming Jake was only staying there temporarily while his apartment underwent renovations. The real story was far more calculated than I could have imagined. Poppy met Jake at her gym 8 months before my deployment. He worked there as a personal trainer, and they started having private training sessions together. What I thought was Poppy getting into fitness for our wedding was actually her spending time with him. She even used money from our joint account to pay for these sessions, logging them as wedding-related fitness expenses. They had been planning this whole thing for months. Poppy and Jake were just waiting for me to deploy so they could move in together. The day after my plane left, Poppy gave Jake a key to our house, the house I bought with my savings from 2 previous deployments and countless extra shifts. She even added him to our home security system and changed all the codes. What they did to my house makes me physically sick. My sister drove by several times and noticed changes, but Poppy always had excuses. They completely redecorated our bedroom, replacing the furniture I had carefully picked out. The photos of Poppy and me that once lined our hallway were taken down and replaced with their gym selfies and vacation photos. They turned my home office, where I kept my military awards and memorabilia, into a home gym using equipment bought with my money. Remember the sick grandmother story Poppy used to cover their vacations? Turns out she did actually visit her grandmother, but she took Jake with her and introduced him as her fiancé. Her grandmother, who I met several times and who always sent me care packages during deployment, had no idea I existed anymore. Poppy told her entire family that we had broken up months ago due to my military commitments, and that Jake was her new fiancé who understood her better. The financial damage keeps getting worse. Yesterday, I discovered Poppy had opened a credit card in my name while I was deployed. She used my social security number and personal information from our shared files to apply online. The card is maxed out at $15,000, charges for expensive restaurants, hotel stays, and endless gifts for Jake. There are charges from high-end stores, spa days, and even a romantic weekend getaway they took for Jake's birthday, all on a fraudulent card in my name. The betrayal extends beyond just Poppy and Jake. My friends, people I've known for years, finally explained their silence. Poppy had been spreading lies about me, claiming I cheated on her during my previous deployments. She convinced mutual friends that her relationship with Jake was justified because she was just getting even with me. Some of my closest friends believed her lies without ever asking me about them. Others knew she was lying but decided it wasn't their place to get involved. One friend sent me security camera footage from our local gym showing Poppy and Jake together months before my deployment. They were clearly more than trainer and client, but my friend kept quiet because Poppy swore she was going to end things with Jake before I came home. Another friend admitted to helping Poppy hide evidence of her affair because she bought into Poppy's story about my supposed infidelity. The level of manipulation and deceit is staggering. While I was serving my country, carrying the weight of combat and losing brothers in arms, Poppy was busy destroying everything we built together. She didn't just cheat, she moved another man into my home, spent my money, committed fraud in my name, and turned my friends against me with elaborate lies. Every memory of our 6 years together is now tainted by the knowledge that she was capable of such calculated betrayal. Update 2. Just when I thought this nightmare couldn't get any worse, Poppy took things to a whole new level of crazy. Last week, she showed up at my base in a wedding dress, creating the most humiliating scene of my military career. My commanding officer called me into his office early morning. When I got there, he told me there was a situation at the main gate that required my immediate attention. As I walked towards the gate, I heard screaming and crying. There was Poppy, wearing a puffy white wedding dress, mascara running down her face, trying to convince the gate guards to let her in. She had brought along her entire bridal party, 3 of her friends who looked extremely uncomfortable in their purple bridesmaid dresses. They were standing behind her, holding bouquets and looking like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. Poppy was screaming about how I abandoned her emotionally by choosing to serve my country, and how I was trying to back out of our wedding. Several of my fellow soldiers had to witness this embarrassing display. Some of them were recording it on their phones, and I later found out the videos had already made rounds in our military community group chats. Poppy was crying about how she had spent months planning our perfect wedding, and how I was throwing it all away because of some misunderstanding. My commanding officer, who thankfully had been briefed about my situation beforehand, handled it professionally. He threatened to issue a military protective order if she didn't leave the base immediately. Even then, Poppy refused to go, claiming she had every right to be there as my fiancé. It took 2 MPs escorting her off the property to finally end the spectacle. Later that day, I discovered something that made my stomach turn. The wedding dress she wore? She had bought it using that fraudulent credit card in my name, a $4,000 designer gown she purchased 3 months ago. But here's the kicker, it wasn't even meant for our wedding. My sister found their secret wedding Pinterest board where Poppy and Jake had been planning their own wedding using all the ideas and vendors Poppy and I had picked together. They had been planning to get married at the same venue Poppy and I had looked at before my deployment. She had even contacted our chosen vendors, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, and switched the bookings to her new wedding with Jake. She used my credit card to place deposits for their wedding while telling me she was saving my combat pay for our future. Jake finally reached out to me, not to apologize, but to brag. He sent a long email detailing how Poppy had chosen him over me. According to Jake, Poppy had told him about her affairs during my previous deployments. Apparently, I wasn't the only soldier she had fooled. He attached photos of Poppy with different men during all 3 of my deployments, including pictures taken in my house. The photos were like a timeline of betrayal. During my first deployment, she was seeing a guy from her office. During the second, it was one of her jewelry business customers. Jake proudly proclaimed that he wasn't her first affair partner, just the one she fell in love with. He seemed to take pleasure in telling me how Poppy would laugh about my trusting nature and how easy it was to fool a deployed soldier. My military lawyer advised me to document everything, the base incident, the fraudulent credit card charges, and Jake's email. We're building a solid case against both of them. The lawyer explained that Poppy's actions, especially using my personal information for fraud and causing a scene on a military base, could have serious consequences for her future employment prospects. The military community is smaller than people realize, and word travels fast. Several spouses from my unit have reached out to share stories about Poppy's behavior during my deployments, parties at our house, suspicious men coming and going, lies she told about me. One spouse even has security camera footage of Poppy and Jake using my car while I was deployed, something she had specifically promised not to do because of insurance reasons. I'm still trying to untangle the financial mess. The credit card company's fraud department is investigating all the charges. They found several large purchases at jewelry stores, items that were supposedly for our wedding but were actually gifts for Jake. There were also charges from furniture stores where Poppy and Jake bought things for my house after throwing out my belongings. Update 3. A lot of you have been messaging me asking for another update, so here's what's happened in the last few months. Life really does have a way of showing people their true colors. Poppy is now dating another service member, a sergeant in a different unit at our base. She met him at the gym where Jake worked, right after their relationship fell apart. Several people from my unit recognized him and tried to warn him about Poppy's history, but she had already spun an elaborate story painting me as the villain. She told him I made up lies about her because I was jealous of her moving on. When he finally saw the evidence, the photos, the credit card statements, and the base incident report, he ended things immediately. The fraud investigation revealed the full extent of Poppy's spending. She didn't just use my combat pay and the fraudulent credit card for vacations. She had been secretly funneling money into Jake's personal training business, claiming she was investing in our future by supporting a small business. She convinced me it was for wedding-related fitness programs, but the money went straight into expanding his gym equipment and hiring more trainers. The credit card company found enough evidence of fraud to reverse most charges. They're pursuing legal action against both Poppy and Jake for conspiracy to commit credit card fraud. My lawyer says they might face serious consequences, especially since some of the fraudulent charges were made on a military base using a service member's stolen information. I took my commanding officer's advice and requested a transfer to a different base. He understood my need for a fresh start and helped fast-track my paperwork. I'm now stationed in another state, surrounded by a completely new community of people who don't know about the drama. My new unit has been incredibly supportive, especially those who've dealt with unfaithful partners during deployment. My sister Amy visits often, and she helped me furnish my new place. We found out Poppy had sold most of my furniture and personal items while I was deployed, claiming I told her to declutter the house. Amy managed to track down some of my military memorabilia through local buy and sell groups, and my unit pitched in to help me replace what was lost. Here's an interesting twist. I recently met someone who actually understands military life. She's an Air Force veteran who now works as a civilian contractor on base. We met during a joint services training event, and unlike Poppy, she knows firsthand what deployment feels like. We're taking things extremely slow, but it's refreshing to be with someone who genuinely gets it and doesn't see my service as a burden. Poppy hasn't given up trying to contact me. She creates new social media accounts every few weeks to send me messages, ranging from apologies to accusations. She even tried reaching out to my parents, but they blocked her after she showed up at their house demanding they help her talk to me. My mom, who once treated Poppy like a daughter, told her she never wanted to see her face again. The last bit of karma? Jake got caught cheating on Poppy with one of their gym clients, a woman whose husband he was training. The affair blew up their entire business. Most of their clients left after the scandal, and Jake had to sell his equipment to pay off debts. Poppy posted a long rant on social media about loyal men being extinct, completely missing the irony of her situation. To everyone who supported me through this mess, thank you. Your messages and advice helped me more than you know. I'm focusing on my career, rebuilding relationships with friends who've proven their loyalty, and looking forward to a future free from lies and manipulation. My new unit is deploying soon, and for the first time in years, I'm not worried about what I'll come home to.